Perfect. So you should all see my screen. As I said in the chat, if there's any questions, obviously feel free to drop them in the Q&A section and we can go from there. Okay. Well, yes, welcome to today's talk. This is all about governing and health checking Jira instances and kind of that progression that we've done or we've seen from server through to GC and then into cloud. Now, what I am going to show you has been built with AppFire apps, but the principles are going to be the same. So no matter who or how you build this, we're going to kind of go through the hows and whys of what we did. Now, a lot of everything that you've also seen has been come from my time working as like dedicated resources or working as a consultant across the ecosystem. So while the stories have somewhat blended to help kind of make this presentation work, everything you have seen has come from my, or will see, has come from my experiences. So yes. Okay, so without further ado, hi, I'm Dan Toon, so I'm the Solent leader, and I am also a solution architect here at AppFire. And we're going to be talking about governing and health checking. There is a trick question because, of course, the answer is yes. So a little bit on AppFire. I'm sorry, but unfortunately, I would get slightly told off, but I'll obviously keep it quick. If you haven't heard of us, we are the largest marketplace partner in the ecosystem. I think we have like 170 different apps. So, you know, there's a fair few out there. And no matter kind of what you're doing, whether you're working with JSM and doing like service projects and kind of following the ITSM framework, whether you're doing things with agile teams or agile at scale or DevOps, or you're managing the applications, or you're doing knowledge, compliance, automation, you name it. We've got tools that can kind of really help and enhance any version of what you are doing. So I want to take a stroll down memory lane. Now, cast your mind back 7 years ago and think about what you might have been doing. The year was 2018. The sun, funnily enough, today is actually shining here in England, so that's quite nice. But usually it wouldn't be. But Prince Harry and Meghan Markle got married 7 years ago. Beyonce became the first African American to headline Coachella. The first Black Panther was released in cinemas 7 years ago, which is kind of scary. But of course, to keep this on theme, Jira Server was still around and Jira used to look like that. Now, who doesn't live those days? So 7 years ago in my own history, I was a dedicated resource. I was a Jira admin, probably like a few of you here today. And my day was really kind of split up into three main areas. We had user requests and dealing with kind of incidents that would come through on a day-to-day basis. We had the new kind of company projects and things that they wanted to do. And we had to, as dedicated resources, work out how Atlassian would kind of fit into those areas. And the final one was about trying to scale and make sure that our ecosystem was as performant as possible. You know, especially back then, there was quite a few things that you would have to do. Now, that's where I want to focus today. I want to focus on how we would deal with making sure that our products were ready to scale with the business and were performing for all of our customers as much as possible. Now, in its very essence, we had to make sure that we had the high uptimes and good performance speeds because no one wants to work on slow servers. And as I said, we were ready to expand. So there were some obvious things that we had to do. Now, obviously, you'd have to properly spec your physical or virtual environment, no matter where it lived. And you had to have a tried and tested backup and a disaster recovery process. Now, while that is still very, very important for cloud, that is a separate topic. And I'm sure that we'll probably have a few discussions around that at some point. But yes, it's still very important. And the other thing that was so often overlooked now was the actual health of the system. So things around the number of configuration items, the number of issues, pages, attachments, all sorts of things that in there would play such a crucial role in the overall health of a system. And because companies didn't want to lose any data, because you never quite know what could happen, things were never deleted. And often they would end up as just this big dumping ground that no one liked to look after. So what did we do? Well, all those years ago, the team that I was working with started doing health checks. We would get things written down. We would be able to make better, more informed decisions because we started to write it down. And overall, it allowed us to track the growth of our ecosystem over time, which for us at the time was also really important because we needed that financial backing. So being able to prove we were growing meant that we could get more budget, which was always a nice thing. Now, in our getting it written down, we obviously chose Confluence to do that, but we stuck best practice advice. We looked at appropriately sizing our instances and removing unnecessary configuration, and we documented that all in one place so that we could easily follow and track progress, make Jira tickets, and do all the good things that we would need to do while linking back to that original documentation. So usually we would want to understand kind of why why it matters. And if we think back to kind of what the teams that we've worked with in the past, past or present, there are certain times that certainly I have felt that team decisions or company decisions may have been made on a bit of guesswork. Now, if you actually look at those like data behind those, you could often think that, you would have made a very different decision. Now, we all know that good decisions rely on their good quality data. So why would the health and the running of our critical applications be any different? Now, McKinsey, earlier in 2025, I think it was back in January or February actually, identified that organizations leveraging analytics inside those decision makings would improve the outcome by about 20%, which is insane. So let's think about kind of the admins and what that might mean. Well, the cleaner the application, the smaller amount of noise, the cleaner it is, the easier it is to look after long term. The easier it is to make sure that you're focusing your time and efforts either on user requests or looking at larger company initiatives as well. Now, less configuration means less mess. It also means that you can standardize more and, again, follow more best practice advice. And it just makes the overall experience as an admin a little bit nicer as well. So let's look at what we started to do. And as to keep it moving, let's think about what we actually wanted. So we started creating a Confluence template anyway. Now, if we think again about the important topics that we would want to be put on such a thing, we would think about what kind of projects are currently in use and are they being used or are they out of date? Let's think about the users, the groups, and kind of who's in our instance as well. Now, we also, especially for certain industries, might want to look at the permission model and how open or how closed we are. We definitely need to look at configuration. And the more important one is we need to obviously look at apps. And especially in nowadays when maybe budgets aren't going as far with the number of marketplace apps or, configuration is changing within the native platform, we also need to make sure that we're not wasting things. So that's really, really important. But the most important thing, of course, is that advice. We need to link back to making sure that we're always following best practice wherever possible. So where should we find that best practice advice? Well, Atlassian has a lot of great documentation and we'd always push back to go for Atlassian, but also you want to think about solution partners. And if you're working either with solution partners or not, think about the kind of information that they have out on their systems and kind of how it would align better with your specific industries. And you also need to think about your own business. So are you regulatory required to keep information for 5 years, 10 years, or even longer, for things like medical and healthcare? So you need to be able to take all of that into consideration when designing your template. And again, finally, you kind of tie that all up and create your action plan. And as I said, it's a great thing to be written down. It's even better when you can put it alongside where you're working. So for us, obviously, that'd be Confluence. For some teams, it might be slightly different. And once you've obviously created everything, you want to run it. So this is an example you'll see of us actually go ahead creating everything. Now, later on, should you ever want an actual copy and an example, please message me outside of this. I'll happily provide you something. You can obviously find me on LinkedIn to do that. But the full template will go through Jira, JSM, Confluence, what is now obviously Atlassian Guard, and it would look through all of that. But for today, I'm just going to focus on the Jira side because I think it's slightly easier. Now, At the start, we obviously want to provide that overarching summary, the TLDR, because realistically, if you give this to an executive, they're not going to read the full thing. So we want to make sure that we provide a summary right at the start. And then you start going through your topics. So think about your general configuration to start with, then go into users and groups and understanding the makeup of your user experience and your customers effectively. Then the all-important project configuration, understanding what projects are involved, the number of workflows, custom fields, most importantly, custom fields, and your screens and your screen schemes and all those good things. And then finally, you can finish up with apps. And once you've got all of that written, you'll be able to then add in your appendices at the bottom to keep time back to that best practice advice as we talked through. Now, the big thing is obviously being able to pick out your recommendations. Now, that is where you're going to spend the vast majority of it, and you'll see that come through right in a bit. Let me just move this on to make it easier. You'll see this is us filling in a real live one, and you can see lots of good details in here. Actually, I'll tell you what, let me just pause that, and hopefully, there we go. Yep, perfect. Just going to tie this back. If we take a look at an actual one here, you can see that we've provided a good table of contents so anybody can jump to it, but that there is our all-important general observations. We need to be able to provide that to the TLD. Then you've got all your project configuration. That's the importance that we need to be able to, again, rely back to that original data. And then you're going to continue going through looking at things like the JML process, again, looking at sizing metrics, because that's really important, the apps and the app links, because that's also, again, important to understand your makeup. And then your recommendations, understand what is going, maybe could be improved within your ecosystem as well. Okay, right, let's continue. Okay. Did that move? That did not move. Let's try again. So what has changed then since 7 years ago? That's obviously what we started at, and what has changed since then? Well, I myself have obviously changed, had a few numerous roles over the past, but things I've always come across that have stayed the same and consistent is that systems seem to be getting messier and messier. And every time when I would change or go to a new company or help consult with them, it would kind of be the same answer. And it would be one of two things. First of all, people thought that if you moved to cloud, it became Atlassian's responsibility to deal with. Or the other one was, well, we're in cloud, so it doesn't really matter anymore. So I kind of want to just talk through both of those and kind of why that's just not true. First of all, it is not Atlassian's responsibility to make sure that your system is clean and healthy. It is their responsibility to make sure it's up as part of your classic cloud SaaS agreement, but it is not there to make sure it's running best practice models and clean as possible. Now, the second thing is, does it truly not matter anymore? And the answer is still no. You're still going to have things like certain levels of configuration items that are going to change the level of performance you're going to have. You could also have loads of really overcomplicated automation rules. That's still going to slow down your system. And of course, as I've said before, your admins still need a good experience to be able to look after and provide a good end customer experience eventually. So, things like standardizing configuration, they can all lead to easier environments. And less unused configuration just means it's less to sift through. So it's all really important things to do. So what did we do when we were moving through our journey? Well, we would continue to record and follow that best practice advice. It's really important that we continue to do that. And as we were going through and systems changed and native platform increased, obviously certain things would become obsolete and new things would need to be recorded as well. So it allowed us to, again, track how things were changing over time. Now, we were really happy with how things were going, but it was really, really manual, and it was incredibly time consuming to go through all of Jira and all of Confluence and find everything that was kind of going on. It wasn't very user friendly to kind of collect all this information. So being a good team at the time, we tried to find a way that we could improve. And the first thing we wanted to do was trying to become a little bit more proactive in how we gained those metrics. So we thought, why not visualize it? And by visualizing all the different areas, we were able to very quickly pull out possible areas that we could improve. And we didn't have to wait for necessarily having to do these reports, because it was ad hoc and it was right in front of us, and it was really useful from that metric. Now, being proactive doesn't mean that reactive is any less important. Actually, by reacting, you understand that your markets are changing and that you need to adapt with it. And that's a really good thing. But if we can be proactive and necessarily sense these forthcoming changes, or try and do these in a more sensible manner, we can make sure that less time is wasted and therefore keep ourselves better aligned to strategy. So we took a stab at trying to see what visualization we were able to do, and we actually attached our Atlassian administration dashboard to our existing one. So we broke it down into main sections, and the first one was just day-to-day running, so understanding what was going on within our sprint, what open pull requests we might have had, who was on call that day, all of those typical kind of things. And then we would want to move on to thinking about what information would be important to understand at an organization level. So things like number of managed users, external users, what policies we had in play from Atlassian Guard, those were all really key. Then we thought, again, maybe let's look at at product level. So what was important from Jira and Confluence alike, and then obviously financials. But what you can see here on screen is that we've broken down very clear, easy to obtain numbers, things like workflows, unused workflows, permission schemes, unused permission schemes, the number of admins. Now, all of this, you could, yes, go through your entire Atlassian ecosystem and find. But what we're trying to do here is bring it to a central place, so it's easier for us to find and work with long term. Let's keep that going. So we move forward and we continue to now use our great dashboard to make filling in our Confluence template quicker. But again, we wanted to continuously improve. We didn't want to just stop there, and we'd already saved some time by going from what was a 2 to 3 day exercise by writing everything down to now what was a day. We wanted to find and see if there were any new opportunities to again see if we could get that down to maybe a couple of hours, and again look to save some time. And I don't want to just push this agile word around, but the whole inspection and adaptation is how teams genuinely learn and find improvements that they can all do. So what did we realize when we got to grips with that thing? Well, we thought, we're just collecting information at the start. Can we automate that? Can we get someone else effectively to do that bit for us? And then we'll just come in at the end and look at the recommendations and see if we need to make any changes. So that's exactly what we did. We looked at our automation options. We looked at our current automation landscape. We recognized that we had the skills internally and we had the right tools to our disposal. So we thought, let's give it a go. So we started to review the steps, get our requirements written into plain English, which was really helpful. And for anybody that knows me, I always do bang on about getting your things written into plain written requirements. It makes it a lot easier. And we noticed that we also had a great opportunity because we are now looking to automate. And that was simply did we need to do all this one big rule thing, or could we just automate a task entirely? And as we were going through these, we actually realized that this whole project archiving part that we would have tied into our health check, we just didn't need to do anymore. We could simply write a rule to fetch the last date, make a decision based on some parameters we'd set, and auto archive. Now, we then didn't have to do anything about archiving afterwards. So it really opened our eyes to new and future ways to, again, save ourselves some time. Now, as good as fun and automation can be, we all do still know that there's best practice for things. And it's very easy to create automation rules that will overrun their original purpose. They can often become these big, monstrous things to maintain. So what you need to make sure that you're doing is that your cost of maintenance or creation never outweighs the benefits that you're gaining from it. And that could be physical money, it could be time, it could be something else. But you need to make sure that your costs never outweigh your benefits. And in order to reduce the technical debt, we look to reduce it in other areas as well. And that was an over-reliance on highly specific skills. Maybe we look to do things with like no-code or low-code builders, so it's a few more people could help us maintain it. We also played devil's advocate, which is how we spotted this opportunity for automating our archival process, because we were understanding how the rule may adapt and change over time to make sure that we were not having to rebuild things as we go. And then the second thing is that we documented things really, really clearly. And by documenting everything, we made our future selves hate us that little bit less, because it was really easy for the next person that would follow us to come in, understand how the rule worked and what it changed and what happened every step of the process. So it was really useful practice to go through. So I definitely always make sure that if and when you are automating, you follow those steps as well. So as we mentioned, we then looked to create those rules. Now we actually broke our rule, our big thing, into 2 steps. And that's because the first thing we needed to do is we still needed someone to go in and apply the best practice knowledge and advice. So we needed effectively to create a Jira ticket for it and run that on a schedule. So we created a native automation rule to do that. And on a schedule, it would publish a page. It would then create a task and ask it to go through and do that, do the initial analyzation for that. Now that was great. It allowed anybody to then look at that, but that's also because we were able to just silo that bit off, and it very rarely changed, which was brilliant. We didn't have to think about how it was created. Now the second part, we actually did use a script. Now it's written in Python, but in theory you could use any scripting language that you're familiar with to do that. You could look at marketplace apps, things like maybe Script Runner or AppFire's Power Scripts to do this. Or you could just, again, like I said, look at maybe writing a Python script if you've got the skills to do so. Now, you'll see here, it's a bit small, so I will zoom in quickly. It's not really improved, sorry about that. But what you'll see here is that actually all I'm doing is adding in some REST API calls and adding in some variables to catch the data that we get back. Now, each element, and that's because of what it is that each element that we're looking at, maybe the number of projects or the number of custom fields that we have, unused custom fields or whatever, can be got from an API call. So as long as we were able to store all those data fields, we could then create another API call that effectively pushed out to Confluence an updated version. And what you'll see in a second is that all we've done is inputted all of those different variables somewhere on the makeup of what would be that Confluence page. And that's how we enabled the automation to really do all of our hard work up front. Now, this obviously does require a level of skill set, but there's many things, and there's loads of people in the community that can help you do that. But ultimately, all we did is inputted the variables that we just captured to somewhere on this big Confluence page, and that's how we managed to create our automation. Now, where would have we gone in the future? Now, this is just before I left and joined AppFire, but we were really starting to understand and see whether or not AI could help us, because what we had just discovered is we were able to automate the entire page creation, but again, we still needed to go in there and provide that advice. But we had, at that point, over the many, many teams that I'd done, had collected, almost 10 years now, because I did it slightly beforehand as well. I've been in, but definitely 7 to 10 years worth of really good health check data. We understood what best practice advice looked like because we had the Atlassian documentation. We had our consultant, our solution partners and consultants there know also what would be great. So, we had lots of things. So could we give that to maybe a Rovo agent and have the Rovo agent read that tiny bit at the end, or read the thing and create a table at the end that says, here's the things that I recommend you need to go and do. And that's where we're really starting to go. And obviously, I wish that we continue doing that. And I hope the team that I left has actually gone into looking at. But that's the important thing. Now, what all of this enabled us to do was really think about making the most of what we got. We found huge amounts of improvements, and what we got back was a ton of time. But we knew that we needed to clear the backlog of tasks that we had and really start to zero down on improving our customer experience. So what we wanted to do was take this big long list and get it to closest to zero as you can. And because what that enabled us to now do is improve our customer experience, improve our experience as an admin, and then eventually think about how else we can improve our system. What other tasks can we automate? What other things can we remove? And what you're seeing here is something that we actually did with our time back. We created a self-service portal where customers, or our internal customers, our users, were able to request things automatically without us having to get involved. So things like adding users to groups, or creating temporary admin access, or new projects, or archiving projects, or all of those things. So we really enabled us to get the most out of what we had back by just understanding where we were today. Now, it wouldn't be some sort of presentation with some sort of key takeaways. So let's just think about where I think the most important ones are from today. Now, the first thing is it's extremely important to inspect and adapt, and always think about continue learning where you are as a team, and really take that time to dedicate to do it, because once you do, you'll be able to find so many improvements everywhere. The second is documenting everything. It is really important to be making sure that you have the documentation, because your future selves will love you for it. But it's really also important to be able to make it visual, because once you have it, you can make better, more informed decisions. The third is getting visual, because if you can make reports and make those levels of charts and graphs and all those nice diagrams, your eyes will catch it quicker. And as the saying goes, a picture speaks 1,000 words. You'll be able to look at things in maybe a different light. And the fourth, as I've shown in many ways, is unlock the automations. Automation and generative AI are genuinely going to be the future, and they are enablement tools and not replacement. So, if you are, we're only just scratching the surface, but if you're genuinely curious, look at your automation landscape and think about maybe areas that you can unlock it with some automations. And just one final thing I think you're learning, more importantly, that you can take today is, with 15 minutes scheduled in your calendar this week, we're at the start, we've got some good days the rest of this week. Can you find 15 minutes in your diary to just look over your one area of your Jira instance? Maybe let's choose workflows, and think to yourself, is it clean? Do we have any wasted workflows in here that aren't being used? Could we standardize and remove some of the workflows? And is there a benefit to standardizing for us and our customers? Because the trick answer is yes, of course. But thank you very much, everyone, for listening in. And are there any questions at all?